One man walked out of prison that morning, free, unconditionally, without explanation. The crowd had chosen him over someone innocent. His name was Barabbas, and he was a murderer. The man who took his place was Jesus. Think about what that means, not as a theological concept, as a physical event. Two men, same prison, same morning. One walks out, one walks to the cross, and the one who walked out had done everything the one on the cross was accused of. Barabbas was a revolutionary. He had led an uprising against Rome. He had killed someone during that uprising. He was guilty, convicted. His execution was scheduled. He knew he was going to die, and then a crowd screamed his name, and a Roman governor washed his hands, and soldiers came to his cell, not to execute him, to release him. This is the most personal picture of the gospel in the entire Bible, and it is built around one man whose name almost nobody investigates until now. His name in Aramaic, Barabbas, son of the Father. Some scholars note the irony immediately. The crowd chose Barabbas, son of the Father, over the one who actually called God his Father. But who was he? The four Gospels give us fragments. Matthew calls him a notorious prisoner. Mark says he was among rebels who had committed murder in the uprising. Luke says he was thrown into prison for insurrection and murder. John simply calls him a robber. Four accounts, four different details, all pointing to the same picture. He was not a petty criminal. He was a revolutionary. In first-century Judea, there was a group called the Zealots, Jewish nationalists, who believed Rome had no right to occupy the land of God, who believed that violence was the only appropriate response to Roman occupation. Barabbas was one of them, and he had gone further than most. He had led an actual uprising, an attempt at revolution, during which someone had been killed, whether by his hand directly or by his followers. The Roman law didn't distinguish. He was responsible. He was convicted. He was condemned. His death was not a question, only a matter of when. Every year at Passover, the Roman governor had a custom, a political gesture, a calculated display of mercy. He would release one prisoner, any prisoner the crowd chose. It was called the Paschal Amnesty, and its purpose was political, to ease tensions during the most volatile week of the Jewish calendar. Passover was when 1 million Jewish pilgrims flooded Jerusalem, remembering their liberation from Egypt, burning with the desire for liberation from Rome. The governor needed to release some pressure, and releasing one prisoner was a cheap way to do it. In 33 AD, the governor was Pontius Pilate. We know a great deal about Pilate from sources outside the Bible. The Jewish historian Josephus describes him as inflexible, merciless, and prone to violence. He had already sent soldiers into the temple with hidden weapons, already crucified thousands, already provoked multiple near riots. Rome was watching him. His position was not secure. He needed this Passover to pass without incident. And then, on the morning of Passover, the religious leaders brought him a problem he didn't want. A teacher named Jesus from Galilee, accused of claiming to be the king of the Jews. And Pilate immediately knew something was wrong with this arrest.
Matthew chapter 27. Pilate asks Jesus directly, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answers, "You have said so." And Pilate is confused, because this man, this calm, quiet, unarmed man, does not look like a revolutionary. He doesn't look like a threat. He doesn't look like someone who is trying to overthrow Rome. And Pilate, who had crucified actual revolutionaries, who knew the difference between a dangerous man and a convenient accusation, saw through it immediately. "Do you not hear how many things they testify against you?" Pilate asked. Jesus said nothing, and the text says, "The governor was greatly amazed. He had never seen anything like this. An accused man who didn't defend himself, didn't beg, didn't argue, didn't negotiate, just stood there in complete peace." While outside, the crowd was gathering, and the chief priests were working the crowd, preparing the choice. And Pilate had an idea. He would use the Paschal Amnesty. He would offer the crowd a choice: Jesus or Barabbas, the innocent teacher or the convicted murderer. He was certain about the outcome. He was wrong.
Matthew chapter 27, verse 19. While Pilate was sitting on the judgment seat, a message arrived from his wife. "Have nothing to do with that righteous man, for I have suffered much because of him today in a dream." His wife had a dream about Jesus. That disturbed her enough to interrupt a Roman court proceeding. In Roman culture, dreams were taken seriously. They were considered messages from the gods, warnings, omens. And here, a Roman woman, not Jewish, not a follower of Jesus, received a dream that told her this man was righteous. And she was so disturbed, she sent a message to her husband in the middle of his court session. Pilate received the message, read it, and continued the trial. This moment is one of the most haunting in all of Scripture, because it means, at this point, everyone knew, the chief priests knew Jesus was innocent. They were manufacturing charges. Pilate knew Jesus was innocent. He said so multiple times. Even Pilate's wife knew, through a dream. And yet, the machinery of injustice kept moving forward because of fear, because of politics, because of the crowd, and because one man chose his career over his conscience.
Pilate comes out of the crowd, and he offers the choice. "Which one do you want me to release to you? Jesus Barabbas, or Jesus who is called the Messiah?" Both men were named Jesus. Matthew, in the oldest manuscripts, names Barabbas as Jesus Barabbas, Jesus, Son of the Father, against Jesus, Son of God. Two men named Jesus, both sons of a father. The crowd must choose, and Pilate is certain of the outcome. He is offering the crowd a convicted murderer against a beloved teacher, a man who killed against a man who healed, a violent revolutionary against someone who said, "Love your enemies." He expected the crowd to choose Jesus, the teacher, the miracle worker, the one who had fed 5,000 people, who had healed the blind, who had raised the dead. He was wrong. The chief priests had done their work. "Which of the two do you want me to release?" Pilate asked. "Barabbas," they answered. One word, shouted by a crowd, and the course of history changed.
Pilate tries again. "What shall I do then with Jesus, who is called the Messiah? Crucify him." They all answered. "Why? What crime has he committed?" Pilate asked. But they shouted all the louder, "Crucify him." 3 times in the Gospels, Pilate declares Jesus innocent. "I find no basis for a charge against him. I find no basis for a charge against him. I find no basis for a charge against him." 3 declarations of innocence from the judge. And still, the execution. And then Pilate, seeing that he was getting nowhere, and that instead an uproar was starting, took water and washed his hands in front of the crowd. "I am innocent of this man's blood," he said. "It is your responsibility." And the crowd answered, "His blood is on us and on our children." And he released Barabbas, and he ordered Jesus to be flogged and handed him over to be crucified. And somewhere in that prison a door opened, and a murderer walked out into the morning light, free.
Here is what we know, and what we can reasonably reconstruct.
Barabbas walked out of prison into Passover Jerusalem.
1 million people on the most important day of the Jewish year.
The city was impossible to leave. You couldn't just disappear.
The gates were controlled by Roman soldiers.
The streets were packed. And somewhere in that city, the man who took his place was being flogged, then dressed in a purple robe, then crowned with thorns, then mocked, then forced to carry a cross through the same streets. The procession to Golgotha, the Via Dolorosa, went through the heart of the city. In front of everyone, there is every possibility that Barabbas was in that crowd, that he saw the man who took his place, carrying his cross, that he recognized him, had seen him in the prison perhaps, had heard the name, understood what had happened. We don't know. The Bible doesn't tell us. But we know this: in a city of 1 million people, on the day Jesus was crucified, Barabbas was there, somewhere, free, because of the man on that cross.
Why this is the most important scene in the entire Bible. Every major Bible scholar, across every traditions, identifies the Barabbas exchange as the most vivid single picture of substitutionary atonement in the entire New Testament. What does that mean? Substitutionary atonement is the theological term for what Jesus did on the cross. He substituted himself in place of those who deserved death. He took what they deserved so they could receive what he deserved. Barabbas makes that abstract concept completely concrete. Barabbas was guilty, convicted, condemned, scheduled for execution. Jesus was innocent, acquitted by his own judge, 3 times declared not guilty. And yet, the guilty one walked free, and the innocent one was executed. This is not metaphor. This is not symbolism. This is what physically happened. On a specific morning, in a specific city, with 2 specific men, and the name of the guilty one means Son of the Father, as if God wanted to make sure nobody could miss the point. Barabbas is every human being, convicted, deserving death, and freed by someone who took their place. The only difference between you and Barabbas is that you know the name of the man who took your place. The question the Bible doesn't answer. And then the Bible falls silent. After the release of Barabbas, he disappears completely from the text. Not one more mention, not one word about what he did next, where he went, how he lived, how he died. The Bible gives us everything we need to understand the substitution, and then, deliberately it seems, leaves the rest untold. But history and tradition have not been entirely silent. Some early church writers suggest Barabbas was present at the crucifixion, watching, understanding, and that what he saw changed him. One tradition, unverifiable but compelling, suggests Barabbas eventually became a follower, that the man who was freed in place of Jesus came to believe in Jesus. We cannot confirm this. The historical record is silent, but here is what we can say with certainty. Barabbas knew something that billions of people have tried to understand intellectually for 2,000 years. He knew it physically, in his body, in his chains, in his walk out of that prison. He knew, not as doctrine, but as lived experience, that an innocent man had taken his place, and whatever he did with that knowledge, he lived every day after, as a man who should have been dead, as a man who was alive, because someone else took his punishment.
Every breath, a gift he didn't deserve, from a man who owed him nothing. The one.
There is a temptation, when reading this story, to distance yourself from the crowd, to say, I would not have done that. I would have chosen Jesus, not Barabbas. But consider this. The crowd in Jerusalem that morning was not composed of evil people. They were ordinary people who had been told what to say by people they trusted. Religious leaders, people of authority, people who seemed to know what was best. And they followed the crowd. They repeated what they heard. They chose the option that seemed safest in the moment. And an innocent man died, and a guilty man went free. How many times, in how many ways, has that crowd made that choice? How many times have we followed what we were told to believe without examining it? How many times have we chosen what was comfortable over what was true? How many times have we shouted, "Crucify him," about something we never investigated? The crowd is not a villain. The crowd is a warning, and it is a warning about the easiest thing in the world: following the voices around you instead of the truth in front of you.
Of all the people in this story, Pilate may be the most tragic. Not because he was the worst, but because he was so close to doing right. He knew Jesus was innocent. He said so. Repeatedly. He tried to release him 3 separate times. His own wife warned him in a dream. He had every reason, every instinct, every piece of information pointing toward releasing Jesus, and he didn't. Why? John chapter 19 tells us, when Pilate tried again to release Jesus, the crowd said, "If you release this man, you are not a friend of Caesar. Anyone who claims to be a king opposes Caesar, friend of Caesar." The title Amicus Caesaris, friend of Caesar, was an actual formal title in Rome, a political designation that came with privileges and protection. Pilate had that title, or needed it, or feared losing it. And when the crowd threatened to report him to Rome, Pilate broke. He chose his title over his conscience. He chose Caesar over justice. He chose his career over an innocent man. And he washed his hands and called it someone else's problem. But water doesn't wash that kind of stain. Pilate's name is still repeated 2,000 years later in the Apostles' Creed, every Sunday, in every church around the world. Suffered under Pontius Pilate, was crucified, died, and was buried. The man who wanted to be forgotten became permanently remembered, as the judge who knew and condemned anyway.
Here is what this story forces you to consider. Barabbas did not ask to be freed. He did not earn his freedom. He did not deserve his freedom. He did not even fully understand his freedom in the moment it was given. A crowd made a decision. A governor made a decision. And a man walked out of prison, free. Not because of anything he had done, but entirely because of what someone else was about to do. That is the gospel, in its most stripped-down form, without theology, without doctrine, without church language. A guilty man walking free because an innocent one took his place. And the question, the only question that matters, is the same question Barabbas faced in that Jerusalem street. What do you do with this freedom? Barabbas could have gone back to his revolution, back to his violence, back to his agenda, using his freedom to do exactly what landed him in chains. Or he could have let what happened change everything about him. Let the impossible mercy transform the man it freed. The gift of Barabbas's freedom was not just freedom from prison. It was an invitation to become a different kind of man. And so is yours, because you are Barabbas.
You have always been Barabbas. Not a murderer necessarily, but guilty of something, deserving of something. And someone took your place. Not reluctantly, not by accident, but specifically, willingly, knowing exactly what it would cost. And the question he asks is the same question the morning light asked Barabbas as he walked out of that prison. Now that you are free, what are you going to do with it?